that we are discussing. So the name of the chapter is The Alchemy of Nature, and the author, the writer of this chapter is a person named Raksha Baradia. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the chapter before I actually start discussing it with you. The title, I'm going to try and explain the title or discuss the title with you a little bit before I get into what the chapter talks about. So let's try and understand what is alchemy. Okay, the chapter's name is The Alchemy of Nature. So we are talking about some kind of process, something that happens in nature. So alchemy, as mentioned in this green, geometric shape, this circle nahi hai, but this figure is there in the at the end of your chapter. If you just turn your textbook to the end of your chapter, you can find this there. Alchemy is an ancient forerunner of chemistry. A forerunner of chemistry means that it's a subject, it's a field of study that came before chemistry, about the attempts to convert base metals into gold. Here, it refers to a mysterious magical process of transforming things. So when I read about it, when I tried to understand what is alchemy so that I could discuss it with you, what I realized is that what I read is that alchemy in olden days, in the ancient times, when people realized or understood gold to be a precious metal, they would try to convert other metals into gold, other basic metals into gold. Okay. And in this chapter, the author, Raksha Baradia, she uses this transformative process to explain the different types of mysterious meaning like almost miraculous, right? Transformations that happen for which there is no explanation as such. Okay, so we're going to discuss what are these different elements in nature she's talking about and what are the transformations that she's talking about. Okay, as you can see, to transform something means to take it from a simple state to a precious state, and in this doesn't always mean to a precious state. In this case, we are transforming from something from a simple state to a precious state. Just like if you take iron or some other, I'm not sure if iron is a base metal, I doubt it, but if you just take any base metal and turn it into a very common metal and turn it into gold, which has a lot of value, it's very precious, then that is similar to what Raksha Baradia is trying to highlight in terms of what we see in nature. Okay, so basically we're talking about changes and transformation. Through this chapter, we will cover reading and comprehension, of course, because there will be comprehension questions at the end of the that we will discuss, some during and some at the end of the chapter. There are grammar topics that we will cover through this chapter. Concrete and abstract nouns. There are two different types of nouns which you have done before in class 7. We will cover those. Transitive and intransitive verbs. These are again two different types of verbs. They have very different functions. So we're going to talk about these as well. Vocabulary. We're going to look at a lot of describing words which are adjectives and adverbs. Very quickly, if I had to go through it, adjectives describe nouns, adverbs describe verbs or adjectives. So why how do I know, or why should we keep an eye out for adjectives? Is because the author is going to be describing a lot of things in nature. She's going to be describing a lot of elements of nature, and there you should keep an eye out. She does not just use the words good, amazing, wonderful. There are much more rigorous words that one can use to enhance one's language, and those words we can pick up from this chapter. So do keep an eye out. As far as writing is concerned, we are going to be doing information transfer as the writing piece for this topic, for this chapter. Now, as you can see, all of this is a lot and it all can't be covered in one class. So today I will introduce the lesson, explain the lesson with your help. We will discuss the lesson, and over the week you will complete on one on each day. You will do writing. On another day you will do grammar and vocabulary, and writing you will do on Friday. So reading on one day, grammar vocabulary, reading on Monday, grammar vocabulary on Wednesday, and writing on Friday. And it will take you about this 1 week to get through this. If we can work faster, we should try, but otherwise this is fine. Are you all okay so far? Are you understanding what we are doing, what chapter we are going to discuss, the topics we are going to cover? Okay, thank you, Karthik, Khadija, Prachi. Waiting for at least 3-4 more thumbs up, and then I'll move on quickly. Yeah, thank you, Ankit. Chan, thank you. Okay, some people have joined. Shiv Kumar is here, never seen him before. Anushka is here. Fiza, Satyam is here. Okay. Okay, let's move on then. So, I've discussed one element of the title with you. Now I'll discuss the author with you. If you turn to the last page of your chapter, just where I asked you to see that green figure where the definition of alchemy is given, there you will see also the author's name at the end of the lesson. Now this person, Raksha Bharadia, as you can see, she is someone who has studied and grown up in Kolkata. The reason this author is special or well known is because there is a book series which I have put an image of that book series on the right hand side. There's a book series called Chicken Soup. Okay. Now, Chicken Soup is a series of, one could say, self-help or self-discovery books, which are meant to give kind of advice, lessons, suggestions on how to cope with different types of situations in life. Chicken soup in itself, in Western culture. Chand, please mute yourself. Yeah. Chicken soup in itself, in a lot of cultures, is considered to be a very comforting meal. So when you are not feeling very good, people would offer you, or people would suggest that you drink chicken soup because it's a very comforting meal, especially when people are sick. So there are many versions of the not many versions, many published volumes of the book with different names. So for example, Chicken Soup for the Teenager's Soul, Chicken Soup for the Mother's Soul. So it's basically, the series is called Chicken Soup for the Soul, and in each new book they will make it specific to a particular audience. Are you all with me? So in this, they did come out with a book called Chicken Soup for the Indian Soul, which of course was catering to the Indian audience. It was supposed to be a comforting book with a lot of relatable examples and experiences for Indians to connect with. Okay. So Raksha Baradia, why she connected with this is because she co-authored this series, this book, which is part of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. So she has written the Chicken Soup for the Indian Soul along with a few other writers. So that is her most famous work, as far as I know. And the next thing I have read of hers is just this chapter. Okay. So this, I believe, this chapter was published either as an article or in a magazine, I believe, which we are reading today. Okay. So I'm going to, now that you have some context and you can see the author, I hope it's a little bit more relatable, the story. So okay, originally this presentation that I'm currently sharing with you, originally this was designed to be discussed in a way where students have their textbooks open in front of them and the teacher is displaying these images on the phone or tablet or whatever, so that the student can read from the textbook and watch the images on the screen so that they can get a complete picture of what is being discussed. Now what I want to see is, please show a thumbs up if you have your textbook open in front of you. So 3 people have their textbook in front of them. I need to know if more of you have it. I need to know now because that will change how I decide to do this chapter. Okay. So since very few of us, a small minority has the textbook open in front of them, I'm going to switch between the textbook and the images. Okay, so I'm going to need you to pay attention. I'm going to need you to keep your eyes on the screen that I'm sharing. My video is anyway off, so please don't be distracted with anything else. Please keep your eye on the screen that I'm sharing. Okay. Now the chapter starts on page number 38. It actually starts on page number 37, where we have a couple of warming up activities. What I would like you to do is just take a minute. Let's just do the first warming up activity and then we'll move to the lesson. Okay. The question says to rearrange the good qualities in each set. There are 4 sets, as you can see: set 1, set 2, set 3, and set 4. Rearrange the good qualities in each set so that the first letter of each of the words should make a meaningful word. Join the sets and get the message. So as you can see, I'm going to highlight something right now. There are different words in every set. So please rearrange the sets in such a way that the underlined one, which is, you can see the first letter of every word, should form a word in itself. Very disappointing display by me is that the answer is pretty much already here for you. That is very sad. I did not realize. But can we just take a moment to see how we arrived here? Let me try and give you another one. Okay. I'm finding it a little bit difficult to do that right now. What you can do is do this. Go to page number 38 of your textbooks if you have that in front of you, and just try to solve question 1 for yourself um, on your own. And if you're not able to do it right now, if you don't have the textbook in front of you right now, I will share anyway this the particular pages of this textbook with you later, so you can try it later as well. I'm just going to go through the questions with you so you can see how we are leading up to the chapter. Okay. Just so you get an idea of what the warming up is supposed to do. Various aspects of nature have, question 2. Various aspects of nature have special features that make them differ from one another. What the question says is different parts of nature have different and special features which make them different from each other, which make them special. So, for example, birds, um, if we were to look at the category of birds, we can make them, we can differentiate birds from based on their appearance, their shape, color, size, food habits, and their habitat. Now, similarly, if you had to give me these qualities, if you were to give me the appearance, the shape, the size, the sound of, say, water, how would you describe it? Let's do the second one, which is water. These are the qualities that you have to give me. You have to give me the appearance, the shape, the color, the size, and the habitat. Even the sound is fine. So please use the chat and tell me. Use the chat and tell me what is the appearance of water like. Appearance means how does it look? What is the shape? What is the color? What is the size? I have one response from Karthik. I have a response from Aarti, Prachi, and Fiza also. Another response from Karthik. So I'm going to now start reading the responses because I won't be able to keep up otherwise. So Karthik says that water is transparent, so that it is colorless, as you are saying. It is transparent. Prachi says the appearance or the shape is. She says it's in liquid form, so that is one thing. Uh, the shape, Aarti says, Aarti and Kusum are attending together, I believe. They say it's like a wave. Okay, I'd ask you to think about the shape of water once again. Fiza says it's unlimited in size. I think what you mean to say is um, that how much. Okay, I will try and check with you. Fiza, what do you mean by unlimited in size? Khadija says the taste of water can be sweet or salty. Prachi says a very interesting thing. She says that it takes the shape of the container. That is correct. Its shape is not specific. Chand, absolutely correct. Takes the shape of the object it is put into. Khadija says. Very nice. So we know about the appearance, we know about the shape, we know about the color, we know about the size also, that it more or less fits into whatever you put it into. And the habitat, where do we find water? Habitat is the natural environment in which something is found or in which something lives. Chance says it's in the ocean, right? While that is the final home of all water bodies, what are some other water bodies that you may have learned about? Rivers, near the rocks, lakes, wonderful. Streams, very nice. The sea, pond, very nice. Well done. What is the sound of water like? Would any of you like to describe? I am. This is just for fun. The sound aspect. Like, okay, Karina says it could sound like raindrops. Some people are saying it could sound like the waterfall. Prachi says like ripples. Water droplets. Yeah, water droplets are a very distinct sound to notice. Okay, well done. So by describing these different aspects of nature, basically what we are doing is I'd like you to do the same thing for land, trees, animals, and insects also when you at the end of this chapter actually. We are trying to describe these aspects of these elements of nature because that is what our author also does. She describes these elements of nature and then gives us more information about what we can learn from it. Okay, so that is why this is a good way to begin our chapter. So I'm going to go right ahead and get into it. What Raksha Baradia does is she starts her chapter with a verse from William Blake's poem. So William Blake is a writer, a poet. She picks one of his poems from which she has taken one stanza, which is written in pink on this screen. Okay. The explanation of the pink stanza is given in the purple box. The explanation of the lines in pink are given in the purple box. I'm going to read that out for you. I'm going to recite the first that verse for you. And you are going to silently read the purple box for exactly 2 minutes. After which I'm going to ask you a series of questions which you're going to try to analyze and answer for me. Right? Take the help of the explanation to answer the questions. Show me a thumbs up if you understood what we are going to do. Okay. Couple of more thumbs ups will tell me that you have thoroughly understood what to do and I'll continue. Okay, well done. Okay, be ready. I'm going to recite now. To see the world, to see a world in a grain of sand, and see a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. I'll read it again. I will read it slowly this time. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Okay? Your 2 minutes to read the purple box starts now. Okay? I'm going to ask very broad questions for which I would like you to unmute yourself and answer so that all of us can listen to it, right? You have to understand that learning any language involves the four basic skills that we discussed in the very first class: reading, writing, listening, and speaking, right? So while I'm giving you work to write and you're sending it to me, the writing skill is being taken care of. Right now, when you stop for 2 minutes, you were reading. So the reading skills are being taken care of. Okay. Listening. For most part of the class, you are listening to me speaking, and there you are building on your listening skills. But what I don't see happening, what I don't see happening is our speaking skills is not getting enough attention, and we are not practicing it enough. Okay. So, in a structured way, please raise your hand to the questions that I ask so that we can practice our speaking skills as well. It is also useful for your classmates to hear each other speak so that if I make any corrections, everyone can learn from that. Can I see a thumbs up if you understand what I'm saying? Wonderful. Okay. So, my question to you is, this is a broad question, like I said. So the poet says to see the world, to see a world in a grain of sand. What do you think they're trying to say by saying to see a world? What is the, if you know, then please tell me what is the figure of speech being used here? And what is, based on the explanation given in the purple box, what is the difference between a world and a grain of sand? According to you, what is the difference between the world and a grain of sand, or what is common between the world and a grain of sand? Why has the poet said that we can see the world in a grain of sand? Please raise your hand and try, and if you were to be the teacher and explain this line, how would you explain it? I would like to see. Uh, Sorry, just the world. For someone, the world can be as small as a grain of sand. And oh, okay, Prachi, please come off mute and kind of explain what you have written here. Remember what I told you all about speaking skills. That's okay. Give it a try, and if we can't hear you, I'll tell you.
Okay, so I was trying to say that for someone the world can be as small as a grain of sand, or one should have the capacity to see the whole big world in just something as small as a grain of sand. Means it depends on how the person looks towards a thing. That's all I wanted to say.
Wonderful. That's very nicely put, and it makes sense also. It's very close to what the poet is trying to say as well. So I think something very important that you mentioned is that it depends on the viewer how they are viewing the situation, right? If we wish to see the world in a grain of sand, then we can. If, as you can see in the purple box, the explanation says something as tiny as a grain of sand can spark off an idea or an imagination of huge significance in the world, right? So to see the world, meaning to see a lot of value, a lot of activity, a lot of importance in something as small as a grain of sand. And similarly, to see a heaven in a wildflower. Wildflower is something that is not, nobody intends to grow it. It just grows on the side of the roads, on the footpaths, wherever it can. And if they're not one of the most beautiful looking, the most elaborate, the most big flowers, they're usually very small. They're usually a bit shabby, a little tattered here and there. Their petals are not always in the best shape. So a wildflower has another significance also. It just kind of it's not part of a garden. It's just there in the wild, right? Even in that kind of a flower, if one can find heavenly aspects, if one can find the beauty of the flower, as Chand has rightly pointed out, the point of view, if one has the point of view to look for beauty even in that situation, then one can witness, experience beauty of heaven, even in something as small as a wildflower, and get joy from it forever. Only one should have the eyes and time to see it, right? Now let's come to the second portion. To hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. As you can see, infinity is endless space, right? And eternity is endless time. While infinity and eternity are endless in nature, is the palm of your hand and an hour also endless? Do they not have a limit? The palm of your hand is your hateli. Karina, you have unmuted yourself. Please be careful. If you wish to answer, please go ahead. Would somebody like to tell me, while infinity and eternity are endless in nature, they are unlimited in nature, is the palm of your hand also unlimited, endless, or does it have some limitations? You can reply with a yes, it has limitations, or no, it does not have limitations. In a literal sense, if you were to think of your hand, if you were to think of your hand, you can't hold unlimited things in your hand, right? There is a limit to how much you can physically hold. However, just like infinity is endless space, but the small palm of your hands, look at what the poet says, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, which is to say, you can hold, just one second. Yeah, which is to say that the capacity of your palms is not limited just by the area or the surface area of it. Just because we have a palm that is limited does not mean that the work that it does is also limited. There is unlimited work that can come out of it. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand means that the work that we can do with our hands, or the results that we can derive from the work of our hands, is endless, right? And eternity in an hour means that we can, just in an hour you can make a difference to the world forever. Just 1 second, huh? I'm just reading some messages that you all are sending. According to the poet, both are endless and unlimited. Yes. Doesn't focus on the size of the palm, but the great things that we can do with our hands or palms. Yes, correct. Prachi and Khadija. Okay. And endless time just goes to say that in an hour, there is limited time in an hour. There are 60 minutes, right? We know this. We know that when an hour starts, when it ends. However, even in just an hour, one can make a huge difference to the world by the work that we do, the manner in which we use that 1 hour, the manner in which we use that time. And I don't think this needs to be true just for an hour. The poet uses it, of course, to maintain the rhyme scheme in the poem, but it is true for a minute, it's true for every second, right? Siddhartha keeps reminding you of this doha, kal kare so aaj kare so ab. Every minute, every moment is precious, and there is a lot that can be done in the minutes that exist in our lives, and to use it wisely is our responsibility. And so the poet says to have the eyes to see, to have the vision to see how these the work that we can do and the time that we can spend to be used responsibly, that is up to us. That is up to how we want to see these things and how we want to live our life. The final line will give you the best understanding. The great deeds can surpass the limits of time and space, and they never die. There are still actions done by people who have used their time a certain way, who have done great things in a particular way, whom we remember even now, even though they are no longer in the world in a physical way. And although they lived many, many, many years ago, we still remember their work. And I'm sure you can think of a lot of such people. Now, the reason I've chosen to spend so much time on this portion of the chapter is because everything that we're going to read from now on is very much connected with this understanding of having a willingness to learn from nature. Okay, having a willingness to learn how to be better from nature, to transform ourselves just the way people wish to transform metals into gold. We should be willing to or wanting to transform ourselves through the lessons that we learn from nature into precious beings, just the way gold is. So let's take a look at the different instances that the writer plays out in front of us. Please turn your textbooks to page number 38. If you're already there, then just get ready to start reading. If I was in an actual classroom, we would be reading, and everybody in the class would get a chance to read. But since that is not possible, I'm going to read, and I'm going to very briefly explain what I'm reading. Okay. At this point, it is 3:40. I think whoever had to join the call is probably already here. So at this point, I'm just going to make a little announcement, very long. So pay attention. We instinctively turn to outdoor activities and nature as a way of relaxing and enhancing our well being. Nature soothes and nurtures, nature fulfills and motivates, nature whispers and commands. Are you listening? So, this very first paragraph, the narrator is asking us a rhetorical question at the end of that paragraph, saying, are you listening? Are you listening to what? What does she want us to listen to? Please put this in the chat. You are free to unmute yourself. Please raise a hand. I will give you a chance to speak. What is the narrator asking us to listen to? Prachi says she's asking us to listen to nature's whispers and nature's command. What else? What could be examples, Prachi, of nature's whispers and nature's command? Or even Chand, you can also tell me. Since you answered the same thing, what are examples of nature's whisper and command? A whisper is when we talk very softly, as you would tell a secret to somebody in the ear. That's a whisper when you talk very softly. And a command is, of course, when you give an order for something to be done. Prachi says that chirping of birds, chirping noises, that's what Karthik also says. So, what is that? Is that the whisper or the command? Very beautifully said, Chand, that the wind also sometimes blows in the form of a whisper. That's true. Prachi says that the chirping of birds is a whisper. Okay, so what you have mentioned to me are very pleasant activities, right? The chirping of birds, the breeze blowing. These are all very pleasant activities. Whispering is also very gentle activity. So the nature has the capacity to be very gentle in this nature, in this way. Waterfalls, Prachi says, right? Nature can be very gentle like that. Now, give me an example of where nature is commanding us to pay attention to it. Khadija gave another example for whisper, which is the soothing air which comes from flowers and which makes the flowers and leaves move. That's wonderful. What's the way in which nature commands our attention? How many of you have heard thunder and lightning and seen lightning? How many of you experienced? Show me a thumbs up. How many of you have experienced that cyclone that happened a few weeks ago? Yeah, was that nature's whisper or command? Very nice, right? When now this is just very literal, right? I went extremely literal that nature is actually whispering and actually commanding. I picked the gentle activities and the harsh activities. Now there are other ways in which nature commands us as well. Um, for example, in a place where yes, Khadija, I was just coming to this. When we don't pay attention towards nature, the trees fall, when disasters occur, right? Another way in which nature commands our attention is when natural disasters may occur, or if when, because of our own actions, nature suffers in front of us, right? Because of a lot of human activity, and you may be reading this in EVS, in science, right? Because of a lot of human activity, nature suffers, and we are forced to pay attention to that suffering sometimes when, say, for example, when marine life is affected, when fish start to die, when there is landslide because of soil erosion, right? Because all the trees have been chopped off, so there's nothing holding the soil, so there are landslides, and suddenly we have to pay attention, and nature commands that we listen in those cases because we have not been listening all this while, right? So the global warming is another, but I feel like it's a very broad topic to bring in, but it's true. So there are all of these different things, and what Raksha Baradia says is we instinctively go outdoors to find a way to relax and enhance our well-being. Nature has the ability to take care of us, to soothe us, nurture us as a mother would, right? And nature also fulfills and motivates us. And this is what she is going to talk about in the rest of the chapter: how nature motivates us, what we can learn from nature. What she expects from all of us by asking this question, are you listening? Is essentially, are you paying attention to the different things that are happening around you and learning from those things? In my lesson, in this chapter, there are only examples from nature, but there are things happening around us constantly, all the time, that we can learn from. So, this is always a good question to ask ourselves: are we listening? Not just hearing, which is when the sound falls onto our ears, but are we listening? Is our mind engaged? So she goes on to say, when I listen, when I do, it leaves me in complete awe. It leaves me in complete awe. Awe means, please look at the word meanings as they are given here. In great wonder or amazement. She feels amazed by what she sees. First example of what we can learn from nature. Pay attention. We have a hibiscus plant in our garden. Every fortnight, a flower blooms on it, big, bright, and tender. Through the day, it smiles with the sun and dances with the wind. But as evening approaches, it starts wilting. The morning after, it withers completely. And by evening, it falls and becomes one with the earth again. The flower comes to life only for a day, yet it does so in full splendor. What if we too lived our life, however short, to its fullest? This first example is of what? What is the first example talking about? What should we learn from? The hibiscus plant. Thank you. Right? Have you all seen a hibiscus plant before? This is what it looks like. Right? This is what it looks like. Very commonly found in India. You can find it almost anywhere. Right? So the life of a hibiscus plant, it every fortnight a flower blooms on it. Every fortnight. Do underline in your textbook. Fortnight means once in 2 weeks. Hibiscus is not gende ka fool. Gende ka fool is different chance. I don't know the Hindi name for hibiscus, but we can always find out. Do find out. Fortnight, please underline, once in 2 weeks. Every once in 2 weeks, a flower blooms on it. Now, how does the flower look? It's big, bright in color. It's a very big flower, big petals spaced out. But it's very tender. It's very delicate. Through the day, when the flower has bloomed, when it has fully grown, the flower, it smiles with the sun and dances with the wind. As the wind blows, the sun is just moving gently with the wind, and as the sun shines, the flower is just shining with the sun. But as evening approaches, now on the same day that it's born, it's fully grown, it's bloomed, on the same evening, as evening approaches, it starts wilting. To wilt means, as you can see here, starts drying and dropping. Slowly starts to, there's another word better than dropping, it starts to droop. D-R-O-O-P, drooping, which means slightly bending, starts to bend. If you look over here, I'm not sure how to show you. Are you all able to see where my arrow is, the cursor? Very nice. So if you look at this flower, it's drooping a little bit more than the others. Like this one is, the one circled in blue is nicely bright, standing, like upright, straight and bloomed. This one is starting to slowly droop a little bit. Okay. As evening approaches, it starts wilting. So slowly it will become it will start shrinking and dropping down. The morning after, meaning the morning after it has bloomed, it withers completely. To wither means to dry, right? To dry out completely. And by that evening, the next evening, it falls down on the ground and it becomes one with the earth again. Obviously, the writer uses the word again. Why do you think that is the case? The very ground from which the plant grows, the very ground from which the flower blooms, it goes back and becomes one with it again. So the cycle of life of this hibiscus plant is complete. Okay. The flower comes to life. Now, this is the significant part. The flower comes to life only for a day, and yet it does so in full splendor. Splendor, it says here to guess the meaning of the word splendor. Why don't you take a guess, all of you? Try in the chat. Yes, Prachi, it comes from the same family of words, splendid, splendor. So what do you think it means? Khadija says beauty. It's close, but it has a hint of a difference. It's a type of beauty, a very, yes, okay, an impressive type of beauty. a grand, majestic type of beauty, right? Yes, a very attractive type of beauty, right? So the flower comes to life only for a day, and yet it does so in full splendor. This takes us straight back to this endless time. In just an hour, you can make a difference in the world, and similarly, in just one day, the hibiscus plant lives its life to its fullest. So Radhya asks us, what if we too lived our lives, no matter how short, to its fullest? Right? So it's a question that is supposed to make us think. It's not a question that has an answer immediately. It's a question that is supposed to make us think. These are called rhetorical questions. Okay, these type of questions are called rhetorical questions. Just give me 1 second. Yes. Okay. I was just getting some instructions from my teachers in school. I am back here. So these type of questions are called rhetorical questions, and they are supposed to make us think. So please do think upon these questions. In your textbook, underline this line. What if we too lived our lives, no matter how short to its, however short to its fullest? And we are going to think about it later. Done? Are you ready to move on to the next learning? Do you want to share something about the hibiscus plant, the learning that you have from the hibiscus plant? I will wait for exactly 30 seconds on the chat. If you have anything to say, please say it. Otherwise, I will move forward. You can even show me a thumbs up if you're ready to go ahead. Okay. I'm going to take this to mean that you are ready to move forward. So I'm going to start reading the next example. We went to a rocky beach and saw the spread of the majestic ocean, and the rocks alongside, carved, sculpted, and shaped by the water. Water is so gentle and rock so hard, yet, as the water flows over it every day, for years, the rock gives in. It takes the shape that the water commands. Our problems are so colossal and we are so small. Yet, if we persist, what is this story? What is this lesson about? Chan says this is a lesson that teaches us to move forward. Khadija actually had written something for the previous one, which is that we should embrace the things around us and uh, live our lives, no matter how short or long. Prachi says that this is about us and our problems. I'm going to highlight the part where Raksha Baradia talks about that. Our problems are so colossal. Colossal means massive, huge, and we are so small. Yet, if we persist, to persist means to try. Please take the example of the rock and the ocean. She goes on to very clearly explain the rock is so hard and the water is so gentle. And yet, every single day, for years together, the water passes through the same place. And when that happens, when this persistent effort happens, then the rock gives in. And what happens? It takes the shape of the water, the shape which the water decides, which the water commands. When I had moved into my first school for teaching Pahadi Empire, I was finding it very, I was having some trouble in trying to establish something in the classroom, or in order to teach, I was having a bit of a struggle. I wanted to be better very fast. And at that time, Siddhartha told me another doha one day in the staff room. He said, Karat karat abhyas ke jadmati hot sujan, rasri avat jat ke sil par parat nishan. I don't know if I said it correctly, but I am sure you also have heard this. Maybe you haven't because you are not showing me thumbs up. So I don't know. Okay, some people have heard. Who is this one person? Chand has heard. Okay. So the principle is the same even here. When consistent efforts are made over and over again, change will definitely be seen. And it is irrespective of how hard or soft the element is. If the effort is persistent, there will be change. So Prachi says, first Khadija says, the water tells us to be persistent and patient. Absolutely, because the water could, or the person who is making the effort can give up at any point. But if they give up early, then the result will not be seen, right? So it is very important that one is patient and is ready to put in the effort for as long as it takes to see the result. So Prachi says, even when we are small compared to the problem, we can work hard each and every day, but one day there's going to be a moment when the problems are going to give up and it's going to be solved, right? Prachi talks about a very important lesson in life, what we can control and what we can't control. Can we control that the problem is there in our life? Maybe not. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But can we control how we react to the problem, how we decide to work towards the problem? Always. And we may try to change that in a way where we consistently try to be better so that the problem one day is no longer there. So let's remember the lesson that we are getting from the rock and the water. Let's remember that change is possible with consistent effort. Let's remember that the water flows through the rock every day for years. It doesn't flow through the rock only when it's in the mood. It doesn't flow through the rock only when it's happy. It doesn't flow through the rock only when it is feeling like flowing through the rock. It flows through the rock every single day for years together for the rock to change its shape and allow the water to command. I hope you are getting the lesson that you should get. I hope you are able to apply it to your own life and see where you need to be putting that kind of, where you need to be the water. What is your rock and where do you need to be the water? Okay. Are you ready to discuss the next lesson that we get from nature? Prachi, thank you for your engagement with the class. I always feel like um, with your thumbs up and your affirmation, I always am ready to go ahead. But I want to hear from some more people. Khadija Chand, thank you. Karthik, I'm not seeing you or hearing from you very much today. Where are you? Okay. Fiza, same with you. Shiv Kumar, Aarti, Kusum, Aditya, Ankit, Anushka, Bashir, Chand, Fiza, Karina, Karthik, Khadija, Prachi. I have taken everyone's name once. Please wake up, come here. Okay. I'm going to read the next bit. We saw bits of grass peeping through the small cracks in a concrete pavement. It left us thinking, however impossible things may look, there is always an opening. Very simple, short, sweet lesson. We saw bits of grass peeping through the small cracks in a concrete pavement. Concrete pavement, cement. Concrete, cement. Cement pavement. Pavement, footpath. Right? So I'm sure you have also, please show with the thumbs up. I'm sure you have also seen little bits of grass like coming out of the little cement in the footpath or in a wall, right? From the small cracks. I'm seeing only Chan showing me a thumbs up. The rest of you step out of your house or no? Okay. Thank you, Fiza and Karthik. So we do see these small bits of grass peeping through this concrete. Now, another aspect we know is the grass is so small, the grass is so delicate, the concrete is hard, and yet Raksha Baradia says it left us thinking, however impossible something may look, there is always an opening. Give me another word for this. There is always a dash. Give me another word for opening that she's using. Things may look impossible, but there is always what? There is always a way to access. Very nice. What else? Oh, sorry. Prachi says, okay, yeah, Prachi also says, Chand also says, there's always a way. What's a wonderful word that starts with an O? That's another word for chance. Opportunity, right? There's always opportunities. There's always opportunity, there's always a chance, and there's always hope as well. It tells us to have faith, there's faith that we never thought, right? So, no matter how impossible something may look, there is always an opening. So, let us not feel like the problem is too big for us to solve. Let us look for that opening. Let us look for the way in which it can be solved, the way to move forward. Okay. Instead of looking at everything that is keeping us down, let's look for the way to move forward, is what the lesson we learn from this is. Right. So if you have, like, I can't help but give this example. If you have not been coming to class all this while and you have suddenly come and everything suddenly feels like there is so much to do, right? There is a way, there is a way to go about it. And we need to find that way. The grass is not turning around and running back into the concrete. It is coming out of the concrete. So we have to find the way out, right? Show me with your thumbs up if you are ready to move to the next lesson we get from nature. Thank you. Remember what you have studied in your chapter 1 of political science. When I see the number of thumbs up, I'm just going to, that they are the ones who are deciding whether the class will move forward or it will stay where it is, right? So if you are not going to give a thumbs up, if you're not going to cast your vote, if you're not going to even give a thumbs down or tell me that you have a problem, I'm just going to look at those who have the thumbs up and I have to move ahead. Okay. So if you have an issue, if you are finding something difficult to understand, the chat is the right good way to put, or you can raise your hand and ask me. I'm going to go ahead now. We saw a bare tree. Oh, sorry. We saw a tree bare of all leaves in the cold winter months. We thought its chapter was over. But 3 months passed, spring set in, and the tree was back to its green majesty once again, full of leaves, flowers, birds, and life. What if we too had the conviction that, however difficult things are right now, it will not remain so forever? Remember, this too shall pass. What is the lesson that we are getting from this element? What if, first of all, what is the element of nature we are discussing and what is the lesson that we are getting? Very quickly in the chat. Very nice, Khadija. Thank you for being so quick with that. The trees teach us, the element of nature is a tree, and it teaches us that problems are not permanent. How many of you remember the poem Life that you did in class 9? Yeah. In that poem, do you remember that Charlotte Bronte said, sometimes there are clouds of gloom, but these are transient all? Do you remember her using the word transient? to say that it keeps changing, it keeps moving, it keeps developing, right? So this is very similar to that. The lesson that we are getting here is very similar to that and very much connected to what Khadija said. Chances we can understand that there hai par andher nahi. I am really looking forward to your explanation of this. Please, Chand, unmute yourself and explain what this means. I would be really happy to hear that.
That there is always not darkness, sometimes there are light of hope and opportunities.
Your voice is a little unclear. Can you repeat it one more time?
That there is not always darkness, sometimes there are a light of hope and opportunities.
Okay. Yeah. So there is definitely there can be sometimes there can be a delay, right? Sometimes it can take some time to see a certain result, but it is not completely uh, gone. The situation is not completely out of control. Prachi is saying this tells us that not everything in life is permanent, be it happiness or sorrow. I think that's a very interesting thing to point out. Just give me 1 second, everyone. Sorry, no. Khadija is saying problems don't last very long. If we're, oh, sorry, I was reading Prachi's response. It tells us that everything in life is permanent, be it happiness or sorrow. Everything has its timing and it will happen till that. Till then, we must be patient and wait for it to get over. Problems don't last long. If we are suffering with a problem today, it will be sorted out tomorrow. Khadija, Prachi, Chand, all those who responded, I think you have done a very good job with understanding what this lesson is from this part of the story. And for those of you who did not contribute in the chat or anything, but you are thinking about the question, yes, this is the lesson that we are getting. Two major lessons. One is to be patient, and the other is to not lose hope, right? The tree loses all the leaves in winter, but it does not mean that the tree is dead. When she's saying chapter was over, she's saying she means dead, right? So it doesn't mean that something is completely gone. But 3 months pass, when time passes and the circumstances change, spring comes in this case, right? Once again, things begin to get better. And just like the tree, if we too had the conviction, meaning if we were also convinced, the strong belief that however difficult things are in this very moment, it will not remain so forever. Remember, this too shall pass. Okay. Um, yes, it is. Thank you all for pointing out that patience and hope are the two values, the virtues that we learn from this part of this point of nature. And if anyone has any last things to contribute with this paragraph, I will wait. Otherwise, I will move forward. The main lesson is to remember that this too will pass. The difficult situations are not permanent. Instead, they are temporary. They will change. Again, a sentence that I have heard a lot from Siddharth sir. This too shall pass. Okay. Next, we saw an army of ants lugging a fly which was at least 10 times the ant size. The ants organized themselves around the fly, lifted it on frail feelers, and carried it to quite a distance. Their teamwork and perseverance were impressive. What if we too are consistent, organized, focused? What is the lesson that we are learning, and who are we learning it from? Karthik says that we are learning teamwork. Beautifully said. Who are we learning it from? Which element of nature? Chand says unity has more power, and Prachi points out that we learn this from ants. Absolutely correct. Right? So when you see an ant, let's see a little picture of all the things that we have discussed so far. This was our water passing through the rock and changing the shape of the rock through its perseverance and persistence. This is our little plant coming out of the concrete, showing us optimism, hope, opportunities. This is our bare tree, which was bare in the winters, but again it grows into full splendor in the spring, telling us not to lose hope, telling us that there is to be patient. And here you see our little team of ants carrying a dead insect, right? So, as you rightly pointed out, the ants, Prachi says, the ants prove that success consists of going from failure to failure without the loss of enthusiasm. And this is a very famous quote, Prachi, true, right? Um, where did that response go? Yes, Chand and Karthik rightly mentioned unity, teamwork, and some of the other values, or sorry, some of the other qualities are mentioned right here. Consistency, organization, focus, right? If you look at the ant lugging means to carry something which is very heavy or with a lot of effort. If you're carrying something, you're lugging it, right? Some of you lug the school bag, not maybe not you, but some of my students lug the school bag on their back. We saw an army of ants lugging a fly which was at least 10 times the ant's size. The ants organized themselves around the fly, lifted it on frail feelers, weak legs, weak limbs, and carried it to quite a far distance. Quite a distance means quite a long distance. Their teamwork and perseverance, again, teamwork and perseverance were impressive. What if we too are consistent, organized, and focused? Khadija says the ants teach us that we should resolve things by being consistent and persistent, by we should not stop trying. And I'm going to nudge you to think a little bit more about how ants work. Have you ever seen, show with a thumbs up, have you ever seen ants taking food back to their little hiding place? Have you ever seen ants? Yeah. Can you describe how they move? Do they move in like any random shapes, forms?
They move in line.
Wonderful, Chand. You're absolutely correct. They move in a line. And do they move in a line because there is a teacher standing there with a stick and saying, please walk in a line?
No.
Then why? Prachi says they move like an army in a proper manner. I like your use of words. Why do they move in a proper manner, Prachi? Why do you think? Chand says there's no teacher standing there disciplining them. Then why should they move in a proper manner? Khadija says they are cooperating with each other. They move in a line, one after the other, taking the ownership of their own things. Okay. They are definitely moving in a line, one after the other. They are taking ownership. And it is, I definitely there is teamwork. So they are not only taking ownership for their own things, but if you have paid attention, each one has a task. Bashir, you want to say something? Okay. Yes. Okay. Khadija says it teaches us to be disciplined even if no one's around. What I'm getting at is that if the ants were to, please do answer me when I ask this, right? If the ants were to move around in any random, formation without any order, right? Then what could be the things that can go wrong? Bashir, you are unmuting yourself. Please check if your mic is okay. What could go wrong if ants were to move around in any random order? The food will fall, they won't be able to carry it, there will be chaos and the food will fall, right? So they have something to lose, and for their own functionality, for their own, the very need that they have to fulfill, it helps them to be in order. Them walk the ants moving in a line helps them to be organized, and it helps them to achieve their goal. As someone rightly pointed out, it reduces the chaos and it helps them to accomplish the task that they want to accomplish. The task they have is not an easy task. It's a very difficult, it's a very big task. So if there is no understanding, teamwork, effort, and order in the way they function, then it's not possible to achieve that task. So irrespective of whether there is, an instruction or not, the ants are they are organized, they are focused on the task which is given to them at hand, and they are consistent. Every ant will pick up the fly. You will not see ants just there won't be an ant that is just acting like it is picking up the fly or not actually putting in the effort. There is consistency, there is organization, and there is focus there, right? And this, yes, Prachi says the need is what forces them and makes them work in the manner. They are hungry, they need to eat, and therefore they know how they're trying to do the best possible way in which they can get food into their hiding place and eat. The need makes them do it. Without a need, perhaps they wouldn't work hard, Prachi says. Right? So a good question to ask ourselves, right? We let's get inspired by Raksha Baradia to ask ourselves some questions, some rhetorical questions, thinking questions. Do we have a need? Do we have a need to feed ourselves? Do we have a need to achieve something in life? Do we have a need to improve at something in our life? And if we do, then what do we need to do? What are we learning from the ants, and how can we embody that? Right? These are good questions to ask ourselves. Show me with a thumbs up if you're ready to move on to the next element. Thank you, Karthik. Chand, Fiza, Khadija. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead. Spider webs are delicate yet very strong. That's it. This lesson is one line. What do you learn from this? What do you learn from spider webs? And yes, we have seen the words delicate and strong, but tell me what we take away from that. What should we do? Let me show you a picture of a spider web, so maybe you will be inspired to answer me. Of a spider web, so you are inspired to answer me by looking at this. What do you think we are trying to learn from this element of nature? Things may seem flimsy or weak, but that is not the sign of weakness. I am first of all, to begin with, I'm very happy to see that you know words like flimsy. It's very interesting. Things may seem flimsy and weak, but it isn't a sign of weakness. And as the textbook tells us, things may seem delicate and weak, but that is definitely not the sign of weakness. What happens to an insect that gets stuck in a spider web? Everybody, what happens to an insect that gets stuck in a spider web? It's always faster if you raise your hand and speak out loud, because it's going to take some time if you type, right? So please, let's encourage each other to speak. he can't escape. Chances that the can't escape, the insect gets killed. The very purpose of the spider web is so that the spider can trap insects in the web to eat it later, right? So what is very delicate to your and my eye, or what can be very easily destroyed by you and me, is actually is a death trap for a lot of insects, right? So what it tells us is, just because something looks delicate, or just because the qualities of something are not very powerful, we should not underestimate the power of it. Just because something does not look very strong or powerful, we should not underestimate it, right? Let me I don't know how relevant this example is, but a good way of how we may end up underestimating something is, let's take our actually no, I don't want to use this example, that's okay. Let me read something else that you guys are saying. Prachi says, like, a person can be sensitive and emotional, but that doesn't make him or her weak. Who knows, they'd be much stronger than they look. That is true, right? It is not necessary that a person who is emotional or who displays a lot of emotions is necessarily weak, right? They could be much stronger as well. The thin and delicate spider web, Khadija says, can still trap insects. Don't judge a book by its cover. Beautiful. Karthik also says, don't judge a book by its cover. So don't underestimate something, or don't make a judgment about something without quite knowing the qualities of it, right? Yes, very well said. I think you have quite beautifully understood what this lesson is. The lesson we are learning is from the spider, right? And what we learn is that not to judge something by the way it looks. Something could look delicate but be very strong. Something could also look very strong and be very delicate. So we don't know. Next lesson comes from, a rainbow colors the entire sky. Again, this one is even shorter than the previous one, but the message is massive. A rainbow colors the entire sky. What is the lesson that we're learning? And who is teaching us this lesson? I can show you a picture if you want. Yeah. The first image is that of a rainbow. Yes, we are learning the lesson from a rainbow. You guys are correct. What is the lesson that we are learning when we say that the rainbow colors the entire sky? I am sitting in Malad right now. You are in Goregaon. Um, Somebody would be, one of my co-teachers is in Ville Parle right now. Right? People are in different parts of the world. My mother is sitting, okay, never mind. My mother is really far. But there are people in different parts of the world right now. Or let's say different parts of one area right now. But when we look up at the sky, say for example, if we can see a rainbow, I unfortunately don't know the science uh, of the rainbow. I'm sure you do. You probably learn it in science. But if we were to look at a rainbow, how do we feel? Please try and express in words. How do you feel when you look at a rainbow? What kind of feelings do we feel? It's very impressive, true. What else? It's very beautiful. We feel joy, we feel freedom. It looks attractive, very nice. What else? While the rest of you answer, I'm going to try and take these feelings of joy and it being attractive and move ahead with that. Attractive, beautiful. And say that a rainbow that's in the sky, if there's a rainbow in the sky, it is very unlikely that your attention will go to something else in the sky at that time. The rainbow really steals all the attention, and it's so beautiful that you are very tempted to watch it, and you derive a lot of joy and happiness from seeing it, right? And I think the lesson, if you look at what it says here, a rainbow colors the entire sky. I think it also talks about the magnitude of an action. One small action can bring joy to a lot of people, right? One thing that is done for the benefit of a lot can really have a huge impact. I think that is one of the many lessons we can take from this. It's very attractive, yes, definitely. I think if we also work in a manner where we display our talents in such a way, we can get a lot of people to notice us. That's another thing. Prachi says, something as rare and beautiful as a rainbow can cover the entire sky, which is very huge. So it's like it limits our view, so it catches all our attention, right? So the sky is so vast, you could be looking at anything. But when a rainbow is in the sky, you generally only will look at the rainbow because it's so attractive and it really grabs your attention. The 7 colors of the rainbow really make us feel very happy. So perhaps we all could learn that no matter how, perhaps we all could learn how to bring joy to others. Since all of you, every single one of you has in some part of your answer, you have mentioned that the rainbow brings us joy. We could all try and be a little bit like the rainbow, where we try to give joy to maximum people just by being ourselves, right? So this is one of the other lessons that we can take away from this, to spread joy. Do you agree? Okay. Prachi agrees with me. I'm now going to come back to the textbook so we can move ahead. I'll read the next bit. Oysters take in a grain of sand, they open up with a pearl. Oysters take in a grain of sand, they open up with a pearl. How many of you know what is an oyster and what is a pearl? Please show with a thumbs up. Prachi knows, Karthik knows. I have zoomed into one particular image. This is the oyster and what is inside is the pearl. Pearl यानी मोती. Oyster को क्या बोलते हैं मुझे नहीं मालूम. So what does an oyster do? What an oyster does is it takes in all the impurities, all the sand, all the particles that are floating around in the water, in the ocean. Seep बोलते हैं उसको. Yeah, seep. Okay, Khadija says seep. Okay. So it takes all of these impurities, it takes these sand particles and everything, and it over a long period of time, this oyster is a living organism in the ocean, right? And these pearls that we wear or people buy and wear as a ornament, as jewelry, is actually something that is found in the ocean. It's something that takes a lot of time. It's something that takes a lot of time to create. I think there's a quote that is given here also, which says that sand irritates the oyster and the oyster responds by becoming a beautiful pearl, allowing difficulties to serve your transformation in the blossoming consciousness that you are. So the oyster considers the sand to be an impurity that is just there, and it works over this, it collects all of these impurities, and over a long period of time, what is developed or what is found is this pearl, which we harvest, which we get, and we consider to be a very precious metal. So, very precious gem. So, oyster takes in a grain of sand and opens up with a pearl. What it takes in is just a grain of sand. If you try and sell a grain of sand or you try to wear a grain of sand in your necklace, it has almost no value. But if you wear a pearl, it has a very, very, very high value. So over a period of time, when you take certain talents, certain actions, certain persistent behaviors, and you work on them, you work on something for long enough, it is possible to create a transformation just like the oyster does with the pearl, right? It is possible to create a transformation and make that into something awesome, make that into something that is very valuable. Do you all agree and understand what we are discussing? Thank you, Chand. Prachi says, if a person takes or maybe gets the impurities or the negativity and has the power to create it into something great or positive, but it will take time and we must have patience. Once again, we are learning patience, perseverance, and working on something again and again. We learned perseverance from the rock and the water also. We learned patience from the bare tree also, the tree that lost all its leaves. Right? So persistence and perseverance is always a key theme that's running across many elements of nature. So it's a very interesting thing to pick up. And a very lovely point that Prachi is making is taking something negative and turning that into positive. Right? Not every negative situation has to remain that way. It is up to us what we do with it. It is up to us how we overcome it. It is up to us what pearls we are producing. Right? There is enough sand in the ocean, but only the oyster can produce a pearl. There's a lot of sand in the ocean, but only the oyster can produce a pearl. So, are we oysters? Do we want to produce pearls? Are we able to produce pearls? Do we have the qualities that are required to do that? These are some good questions to ask. Let's move to the next one. Innumerable stars shine across the infinite sky. Innumerable means uncountable. It can't be numbered. Innumerable stars shine across the infinite sky. Infinite cannot be measured. It's not finite. It's not limited. Right? Again, what do we learn from this? It's very similar to William Blake's poem. And also very similar to the rainbow. A lot of the stars in the sky give us joy when we look at them in the night time. They give us peace. And if you know what constellations are, we can all see them from any different part of the world. We can notice them, right? So they shine so bright that they have the power to create a lasting impact on anyone who watches them. Even though the sky is so vast, their impact is not limited. There are so many stars and they shine so bright that we can learn from them. I'm just going to see if you have responded with anything. Okay. So this is another lesson that we can take, right? To multiply our actions in a way where we can expand its impact. If you have any responses, I will wait on the chat for another 30 seconds. Else we can take a look at the next one. Show me a thumbs up if you are ready to go. Okay. All right. Clouds take new shapes with every passing moment. This is very similar to what I was reminding you of with Charlotte Bronte's poem Life, right? They are transient all. Clouds take new shapes with every passing moment. As you can see, clouds don't stay in the same position for a long time, right? Clouds keep changing. And similarly, yes, Chan, thank you. I was just getting to that. Thank you for mentioning it. It means that we should change as per the situation or the moment. We can't always remain stagnant. We can't always remain the same. We also have to adapt. We have to evolve. We have to change. We have to transform. Do you all agree? These are some of the words that I have used: adapt, evolve, change, transform. Right? Just the way that when the times around us are changing, we also need to change with the times. We also need to change with the circumstances and the situation. The cloud in itself does not remain in the same way for a long time. So there needs to be a certain flexibility, adjustment that we are willing to make. Okay. If anybody else wants to add something, please go right ahead in the chat. Else we can move ahead. Prachi says, we must understand the things we learn from different situations, and like that we must adapt the situation around us and work accordingly. We must understand the things we learn from different situations. Yes, truly we must understand, and similarly once we learn from them, we must allow it to change our situation and to allow it to change us and make us adapt differently. Thank you, Prachi, for your response. Let's see the next one. The wind makes trees dance with unhindered passion. This is another one. And I have an image also to show you. The wind makes the trees dance. Unhindered means undisturbed. without any disturbance, unhindered passion. So very fearlessly, very without any, consideration for, what is that word? Very without any hesitation, right? The tree dances when the winds blow, and you saw this when the cyclone came. You saw this, that the winds were blowing really strongly, and the trees were also moving, and they didn't care too much for how they look when they are moving, or what was how beautiful or pretty the sight looked, but they moved. They moved vigorously, right? So take a look at this and see what is the lesson that we learn from this. The wind makes the trees dance with unhindered passion, with undisturbed passion. And at the same time, I'm just going to read the next one, so we have a couple of things to discuss. Please go ahead and write in the chat or unmute and speak. Water, without a hint of ego, changes its form according to the dictates of the sun and the wind. This is a very interesting one. So we have two lessons to learn from water. One is water and rock, and one is water changing its form. What do we learn from this? Prachi says the trees dancing with unhindered passion sometimes tells us to go with the flow. Yes, I think that could be true. Sometimes we may want to, sometimes the lesson that we can take is to sometimes do what the situation dictates us to do, right? Without worrying too much about how we may appear while doing it. Khadija says from the water example, we learn to adapt to others without any ego. Very interestingly, I want to take you to the scientific or the science aspect of this water example. Water without a hint of ego changes form. Can you tell me what are the different forms of water? I think you call it states of water. What are the different forms? Liquid, solid, that's it, Chan. Solid, liquid, gaseous, right? Okay. So when it is extremely cold in a particular place, the reason that this example says that it changes its form based on the dictates of the sun and the wind is because when it is extremely cold in a particular place, there is snowfall, right? Or there are hailstones. So the water is not falling down as rain, or it cannot remain water anymore. It comes down as ice, snow, right? Similarly, if the temperature is very high, if the wind is blowing very dry, then the water will be more, the water will evaporate also just as quickly. Do you agree? Right? So water cannot choose to be in the same state. Water cannot be egoistic and say that it will not change its shape or form. Depending on what the sun requires, depending on what the temperature is, depending on what the situation demands, the water changes its form, the water changes its state. Similarly, I think, yes, thank you for those who mentioned it. The lesson that we are learning is to learn to adjust. Depending on what is required in a particular situation, if we are also willing to change, depending on what is needed at that time, then we have also said bye bye to our ego, just like water, and we have also done what is necessary at that time. Right? So these are some of the lessons that we can take from this. Let's move on very quickly. When we see a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, a flower turn into a fruit, we experience the alchemy of nature. What is alchemy? Give me one word for alchemy. Starts with a T. Quickly in the chat, give me one word for alchemy. Thank you, Prachi. That was quick. Waiting for some more. Starts with a T, Khadija. T. T for table. transformation, right? We experience the transformation of nature when we see a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, a flower turning into a fruit, right? We see nature transforming something from a very basic situation into a very valuable, a very treasured, a very precious state. See this. You have learnt about this, right? A caterpillar turning into a butterfly. Nature transforms this little being, a very ordinary being, into something extraordinary and beautiful. Similarly, a flower also turns into a fruit. Nature makes this happen, this process. So answer me something. Are we not a product of nature? We are. So are we also capable of transformation? Yes. We are also capable of transformation. So what she says, look at the last line. We touch it. And when she says it, she's talking about these lessons from nature. We touch it and we become gold ourselves. Again, this gold reference is to the alchemy from the olden days. Remember that. So she's saying we touch it. We touch all of these experiences and we become gold ourselves, because today me and this class of, sadly, only 10 students, sorry, 8 students, me and this class of 8 students have discovered so many different lessons from nature, that by knowing these lessons, by taking these lessons from nature and from all that we see around ourselves, we have given ourselves the power to transform ourselves, to teach ourselves to be better, to learn from experiences that we see around us. Right? So, Raksha Bharadya, towards the end of the chapter, is reminding us that this transformation is not just limited to these elements of nature, but also mainly to us. Because once we learn from all of these elements, we are in a transformative process already. We have taken part in a transformative process. These lessons are meant to change us. These lessons are meant to improve us. Not just these lessons, but every single lesson that we learn in life and every single experience that we have in life is meant to develop us and make us just a little bit better on our journey of becoming gold, on our journey of becoming valuable people to society. Okay, so this is this wonderful chapter. We have reached the end of this slideshow as well. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. Right now the time is 4:50. This was page number 30. This was page number 39 where we ended the chapter. I'm just scrolling down to show you the next page, which has questions for you to answer. The first 4 questions, question number 1, 2, 3, and 4, have enough place to answer it in the textbook itself. So you are not required to write this in the notebook. Unless you don't have a textbook, then you will have to write it, I guess. So please just answer question number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I will send the PDF with tick marks, or I will create a document which tells you which questions on which page numbers that have to be done. And I will upload it on the drive. Question 1, 2, 3, 4. In fact, we are not meeting again till there is some time. I will ask you to do some more questions also, which are easy to do as long as you have the textbook. We should be able to answer everything here. But if you have any questions, then you can always refer back to this recording. You can always refer back to the chapter itself to try and answer them. We will come back next only to do grammar together. I will send a document with all the questions that you need to do. In that, you will see one question which says do all the side questions, answer all the side questions. I've told you this before. The side questions are the questions at the side of the passage, right? You see these blue panels in which you can see some questions. So those are the side questions I'm expecting you to answer, right? Those are the comprehension questions. So please just wait for that document to be uploaded. I will do it at the end of this call.